I'm Joshua Kemble, and this is vlog number I don't even remember. So just look in the descriptions and check it out, because I frankly don't even remember which vlog this is. But anyhow, this is the vlog where I talk about Quarterly Stories, which is my graphic novel that I hand write, hand letter, and hand ink, and then hand to you, hopefully someday in print. But until that day, it's available serialized online at quarterlystories.com, where you can read it all the way up to page 51. I'm currently penciling page 52. And this is the vlog where I document the process and the progress of creating that graphic novel, on top of being a full-time art director, a full-time husband, and a full-time father. And yeah, so I'm heading home from work, and I'm hoping to get some pencils done for page 52. And I'm feeling pretty pumped. I've been keeping consistent with my exercises. I've been keeping consistent with, my penciling on my pages. And they take a long time, but I'm really happy with the results. And to me, like, that's a huge deal. Like, I'd rather take a little longer on a page and be content with the results than just knock something out that I'm going to end up having in storage boxes in the garage or whatever, and basically not be happy with it. So yeah, so I wanted to do a quick vlog because Jan, a friend of mine through YouTube, a YouTube friend of mine, sent me a question after he had won the 100 subscriber giveaway of a comic I did called Numb, and he had asked about the stylistic change between the books. So my older style of cartooning was very graphic. It was very heavy blacks, very line oriented and shadow oriented, and there wasn't a lot of hatching or shading. And he was wondering why I made the switch from going from kind of simplified, I'd say more traditional cartooning, to the type of cartooning I'm doing on Quarterly Stories. And I actually think this is really a super interesting thing. So I told him, he had sent me this awesome personal video over message, and it was such a good question that I felt like it should be something I could spend a vlog on. So I wanted to kind of get into that, like why I chose to change my style. And I also wanted to kind of explain like what ways I've arrived at style and what I think about style. So I'm going to start by talking about just style in general. I think as a young artist, especially me going into school, I felt this need to like establish a style, and I quickly broke from that need, because what I went into school thinking I would draw like wasn't what I ended up drawing like. What ended up happening was just a lot of emulation of other artists, meaning just looking at other artists' work and being like, how do they do that? I really like that this guy does that, and pulling all these different influences from different artists that I really admired, and then coming to this kind of pulpy, graphic, just flat black and white style. So that's how I ended up with my own style, and I think that's pretty much how you, if you're watching, either have ended up or will end up with your style. I think if you're going into art school or going into training in art with a specific style bias, like, well, that's my style, before you've really learned or really started to figure out anatomy or anything like that, I think that your style might actually be a crutch. Like, it might be a problem to have a style. That's my own opinion. But I know that when I was teaching at art school, that was like a huge problem with students. Like, they'd come in and they'd have terrible drawing skills, and you would give them a fair critique, like, hey, the foreshortening on that arm isn't working. It looks more like a stump or something like that. And of course that's going to come across as offensive, and of course people, whenever they hear critiques, even myself included, their gut reaction is usually to be like, well, that's just your opinion. But when it comes to things like anatomy or perspective, it's not really a matter of opinion. Like, there's actual math to it. Like, it's something that's measurable and noticeable, and it's a somewhat objective thing. And in the workplace, if somebody hires you, or like for instance, if one of my employees or something drew something with weird, whacked out anatomy, I'm not going to listen to them excuse it by saying, well, that's just the style. Because, once again, the client doesn't care that it's your style. The consumer doesn't care that it's your style. They just notice that an arm is off, like whether it's in a cool style or not. So that's just the thing on style. So I think that before even worrying about style, it's probably good to like get the basics down. But with that said, that's like a big disclaimer. I ended up with my style because I read a lot on cartooning when I was beginning to cartoon, and Numb was my first book, and I don't think it was all that successful stylistically. Like, it was the best I could do at the time, but I don't think I had fully figured out how to balance my blacks within that style, and that's a style I really perfected within the 15 years or so that I was freelancing, and really started figuring out and pinning down with my t-shirt art that I got kind of known for at the time. So but it was a style I played with a lot, and the idea was that I wanted there to be heavy, bold blacks and just very solid black and white areas with really little hatching whatsoever. If there was any hatching, it was feathering, which is kind of that thing that looks like little zigzags. It's actually a mark that's made by a brush, and you kind of make it by like pulling back. It's a really interesting thing, but it's the way you hold your brush, and you kind of put pressure down as you either go into the line or come out of the line, depending on the way that you're creating feathering. But it creates a feathered edge that kind of fans out, and I still use a little bit of feathering, but I use more cross hatching now than I used to. And part of that was because after doing that art style commercially for years, when I reapproached my comic, when I went back into graduate school, I had shown the head of my graduate committee the way grad school works. I gotta kind of explain that a little bit. Is usually you have a committee, and at the school I went to, it was a committee of 3 full-time professors who basically, and one is your chair, so like they're the head of your committee, and these are like your judge and jury that decide whether you're gonna get an MFA or not. I'm not sure how it works with just a master's, but with a Master of Fine Arts, you have to have a committee. You have this whole process of kind of doing an art show that's kind of like your final test to even be accepted into the MFA program. So it's like you spend your first year or 2 in graduate school like building a body of work that's kind of like a test. Like, it's like putting out feelers to see what people think, what your committee thinks, and what direction they think you should go in for your final thesis as well, because you have to write this like crazy like thesis paper and get it published and all this crazy stuff. But anyhow, point being, I had developed my like pre-thesis work, and the chair of my committee actually was saying, when she was reviewing my pencils one day, was like, "Oh, you can really draw. I can't see that with your inks." Now, like, once again, keep in mind, like, I was super offended, and like, because I was like, this is a style I get paid for, I get work for, like, it's a style that's printed on t-shirts, it's got me in design annuals, and you're telling me it looks like I can't draw. And in retrospect, I gave it a week of just feeling furious, and I thought about it, and I realized I wasn't really happy with that style. That was a style that I just kind of felt obligated to do because it was kind of like the Marvel way. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm like a Marvel artist. I'm just saying that like every book on cartooning talks about simplifying, your line and, the details, and really just only showing what's absolutely necessary on the page. And I had learned from that to the point where I had really reduced down my own drawing ability. And this doesn't mean by hatching a lot you have great drawing ability. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm just saying for myself, I realized that that style I didn't feel was the best I could do, and it wasn't particularly like fascinating to me. Like I look at Numb, for instance, and like I see a young artist who's, you know, who was me at the time, who's starting out, who's trying to make this really expressive art with really heavy blacks, and I give my old self credit for being really bold with my blacks, because there's a lot of people who, when they ink or they get into comics, they're just really afraid to make things get dark and to have really bold lines and really heavy amounts of shadow. And I by far didn't have a fear of that. But when I look back at that style, I'm also slightly bored by it. And there's a lot of people who liked it. You know, I mean, that was what I did commercially for years, was that style. And I can still work in that style to kind of, you know, make commercial work or whatever. But for some reason, after my committee chair said that, I thought about it and I realized that I wanted to ink more like I penciled. And so a lot of what I would do, like even for Numb, the pencils would look much more like what I'm doing for Quarterly Stories in ink. It's just that I would simplify them when I inked, or simplify hatch marks and stuff like that to save time and also make it read quicker. And then I don't know, I just kind of decided that I felt like what she was saying was true for myself. And so I instead have decided to really render the crap out of my comic. Now it's not like fully rendered, I'm only doing like 3 or 4 levels of shadow in my hatching. And you know, on the level of rendering, it's not like what other guys that I know get to, like for instance like Jeff Lafferty on his paintings and stuff gets like super detailed and super rendered, and there's full value. Like I only have like 3 or 4 levels of value, so it's not like hyper realistic. However, it does have a lot more levels of value because of a lot of shading and hatching. I'd say the downside of that is sometimes I find myself you know, over hatching, and you know what ends up happening is it makes the panels kind of difficult to read. So that's something I struggle with, where I want there to be a high amount of detail and a lot of hatching, but I still also want the pages to read. And so that's my new struggle with this style. But that's kind of how I changed up the style. The other thing that I changed up was to decide to hand letter my work, and that was specifically because the comics that I liked and love now are mostly hand lettered. And so I realized that if I want to make the kind of comics that I love reading and love looking at, I'm really going to have to just sack up and start hand lettering. However I can do it, like I'll find whatever way and just make it work. So that was the decision, to kind of hand letter the comic as well. So I've always been drawn to realistic art, like meaning like representational art, not necessarily realistic. Realistic might be the wrong word. It's not like photorealism, but it is, you know, very representational of people. Like the people look like people, and since it's autobiographical, like the main character looks a lot like I did in the time that it takes place in. And to get at that style, I utilize a ton of photo reference. And then like that's for one section of it. The other style is just this very silly, very solid black and solid white cartoony style, which I'll be returning to for future chapters, because there's narrative reasons for that, but I don't want to bore you guys. I'd rather show you guys than tell you about it. But anyhow, so it was a long, hard, kind of thought out, conscious decision that I made to work in the style that I'm working now for Quarterly Stories. Now, if you're starting out as a cartoonist, or you're wanting to you're aiming to make that your bread and butter, like that comic will be your lifeblood, then maybe for the sake of getting the work out in a timely fashion, it might not be a bad idea to kind of to do it the Marvel way. And by the Marvel way, I just mean like the basic, like if there's an old book called How to Draw the Marvel Way, and in it there's a diagram of the level of detail, and there's a panel that looks somewhat like what I do for quarterly stories with like a big X through it, at least from what I remember. And they're like, too much detail, too many grays, it won't translate when you print it. And keep in mind, like, a lot of those rules applied because at the time, like, the printers couldn't get that level of detail. They also meant it because most of the work is being made for color, and to do color holds on cross-hatching, I've done coloring for comics, and it's a nightmare if you do color trapping and stuff on, or color holds, or just you're blocking out your flats. To make those selections when the artwork is cross-hatched is a nightmare because you have to manually go through and pick all the areas you're going to fill with color. So it was kind of like a necessity at the time to do that in comics, and it kind of created a style and a look that I still very much love. So I by no means am criticizing it. It's just for what I was making, I realized I don't want to make this just like every comic or in a comic book style. I want to make this in my style. And for me, what I'm feeling right now with art is that crazy, like, overly hatched, really high levels of rendering style. However, because of the style I've chosen, and because I'm not like an exceptionally fast artist, I hope these don't come across as excuses. It's just a knowledge that I have of what I'm working on and my own capabilities. But because of that, I've chosen to choose this style that is a lot more laborious, takes a lot more time to knock out, and like a page like page 51 can take me, like, that took about 2 weeks to do, which is, you know, keep in mind that's 2 weeks of like 2 hours a day, not 2 full weeks. If I had like a free day where I just had 8 hours to just sit and work solid, maybe more than 8 hours, maybe like 12 hours, then I could knock out, I could have knocked out page 51. But because I have to work on my comics interspersed in little periods of time, the style that I've chosen really takes a long time to get stuff done. So yeah, so that's just a little bit on why I've chosen my style. I hope that kind of fully answers your question. Now I'm going to talk about the benefits, because I feel like it's not fully answering it. So I'm going to talk about the benefits of the two. One is the style that I used to work in was much more graphic and much more cartoony and much more boldly graphic and kind of owning cartooning. And I think there's something good about that. And there's something very effective about it. And then the other benefit, I will say, is that by using so much black, just solid areas of black, you can hide a lot more in your drawing. So if you, say, like, didn't want to draw an entire background, you can just kind of black out a lot of it. If you want to simplify things, it's a lot easier to hide them in the blacks. The style I'm working in now, there's less hiding. It really requires a much more conscious decision. If I'm going to make a solid area of black, it really has to have like a design reason for it. But what's interesting is that that's kind of where I've arrived at for my style. And it may not be as popular as my old style was. I don't really know. I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say about it. If you go to joshuakemble.com, which hasn't been updated forever, but if you go in the comics section of the website, you can check out some of my old comics and see the difference in the way I executed comics back in the day as opposed to the way I'm executing them now. And it is pretty different stylistically. So I'd be kind of curious, like, if you guys check that out, if you want to bounce there and then bounce back here and let me know in the comment section, just like which style you prefer. I'd love to hear it. Even though, frankly, I'm still probably going to continue in this style because I'm 52 pages in, and at this point, I want to hit that, 94 mark, which will get me a little over 100-something pages, and then have me ready for my first graphic novel to come out. So, yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of the thinking behind quarterly stories. The other thing I was going to say is you'll notice that in quarterly stories I switch styles. Like chapter 2 is a totally different style than chapter 1. And this is something that I embraced about myself when I was going to graduate school, and what's become a real strength, in my current position as an art director, because the company I work for, we have like thousands of clients, like thousands of different clients, and they're all different styles, and what they want are different styles. So on one day you'll be doing a traditional like travel poster kind of art that's just like really flat color and really fun. On another day you'll be working on like cartoons for giant properties that are really traditional cartoons, like, and by cartoons I mean like Bugs Bunny, that kind of thing. And then from that you'll be working on other things that are like licensed art that are in totally opposite styles. And then sometimes it'll just be like they want something in a futurist style, or something in like a deco style, or something like fully rendered and really like painterly. And so one thing I pride myself in is the fact that like I am okay at emulating like pretty much most styles, and that's something I'm capable of doing, is like kind of working in multiple styles. And so that's another reason I'm working in the current style that I'm working in for quarterly stories, is out of those styles I'm comfortable working in, this style really feels to me like it fits the narrative that I'm telling. If it didn't, I would switch the style in service to the narrative. Meaning like the story is number one, and whatever services the story or will further the story, is kind of the thing I want to do. Another thing is I really do want, and I may not be effective at this all the time, but one of my goals with this comic, like I've gone into this on my vlog before, but I got a little jaded, I think, from working in commercial art for such a long period of time, pretty much since like I was in undergrad and I hadn't even finished my BFA. I just got a little jaded with illustration, and maybe that happened earlier for me, but it just got to the point where working for clients was just kind of like doing other people's ideas, and at some point something happened where I just stopped caring what style it was done in. Like I've always cared, and I consistently still do care. Like at my day job, I cared about quality. Like it should look good regardless of style or substance. Like I frankly don't think style should ever be an excuse for something to not look good. And that's kind of an unspoken thing, but it's a gut thing, and the more you've done art and the more you do art, the more you build that instinct to be able to tell what is quality and what is not. But it's kind of akin to like my personality of like, I don't really have a preference for like a style of movie. I mean, there are some styles like fiction, non-fiction, fantasy, science fiction. I don't personally have like a huge preference, like for kids art or art for adults, violent movies, non-violent. Like I don't really care, frankly. Like there's a few genres that I don't tend to like, but there's always exceptions in genres that I do like. And because that's my view on stories in general, that's also kind of my view with style. Like my stylistic preferences for myself range from like Mary Blair to like MC Escher. I mean, like they're all across the board. I'm not really like particular about like, oh, I prefer this style to this style. I kind of don't care as long as it looks good and there's nothing like really off about it. So for me, that's a huge part about how I approach my comic. Like, if the next chapter needs to be told in Cubism, I'll do a chapter in Cubism, which actually might be really fun. I don't know if I'll have an excuse to kind of do something crazy like that, but I mean, that's kind of how I'm approaching this comic, is like chapter by chapter, whatever style is going to tell the story well, that'll be the style that I arrive at. So that's part of why I'm doing it the way I am now too. But another thing that I was kind of getting to is with the whole talking about getting jaded with comics thing, was that after getting to that point, I kind of embraced the fact that I don't personally need my comics to make a ton of money. I'd like it if they did, but I'm not like looking to like be the guy who gets Eisners and all of that crazy stuff. That would be cool. I'm not looking for it, like meaning I'm not like going out of my way to avoid it. Like I'll give my comic every shot it has to succeed when it's done. But I've sort of embraced the fact that what I like about the comic that I'm working on right now is it's something I arrived at when I wasn't really thinking about money. I was just thinking about like specifically what story do I want to tell? What's the style of art I've always wanted to do when, you know, when I'd make excuses like, well, I don't have time to make this, or I need money so I don't have time to execute things in this way that I want to execute it. Like, if time weren't a limit, if money weren't an object, what's the thing I would make? And that right now is quarterly stories. So I'm kind of doing this as an art for art's sake thing. And then I'm going to put it out there. Like, I'm going to do these YouTube videos, and I'm going to, you know, put it on the web as a web comic. Even though technically it's really made for print, it's going to look best in print. You guys will love seeing it in print. It's going to look great. I've printed it out at the size, and it looks so cool. Because this style really, like, reduced down, it looks like I've been impressed. It looks a million times better than how it did look, how it does look at like full size. And because it's just solid black and white, and you know, it's there's no gray. It's just the art doesn't translate as well to the web as it does in print. That said, I'm still putting it online, and I'm still offering it up, and I'm still, you know, recommending that people read it. Every time I've had somebody who's subscribed to this channel or watch these YouTube videos go to see it and check it out and actually give it a shot and read chapter 1, just get through chapter 1, usually people are really impressed by it. And I've gotten thank yous, and I've gotten, like, you know, the main feedback I get is that people are usually pretty impressed with the fact that it's like a vulnerable story that's about, like, a lot of people feel like it's kind of important what I'm doing. Now, that's not a million people, it's just that's usually the general feedback I'm hearing from people who check it out and read it, and usually they're kind of surprised. So my point being, I guess what I'm saying is that by saying all of this, I'm just saying that I'm still going to put it out there, and I'm going to promote it as much as I can, but I'm just not putting like all my eggs in that basket. Meaning, like, when I was young and in my early 20s, all my eggs were in the comic basket. Everything that, you know, everything I was counting on was in the comic basket. And now, at this point in my life, like, I'm not really imagining that comics are going to be my full-time job or my full-time career. Now, if they become that would be great. But at the same time, I'm not really aiming for that goal. What I'm aiming for is to make the best book that I can make, and then get it into as many hands as I can get it in, and get it in print, and, you know, make art. And that's my goal. My goal is literally to make art, and hopefully art that I can be proud of. And I mean, that might sound generic or cheesy, but that's my goal. And that's why I arrived at the style I arrived at, because I'm not looking to knock this thing out as fast as I can, as quick as I can, so I can get money. That, you know, I've done that. I also don't look down on that. I think sometimes that drive to just make money or to knock something out can make you have a really loose, unprecious style, or a really tight but simplified style. And I applaud that. Like, I think sometimes it can lead to better art than having all the time in the world. But for me, I'm making this as the way I want to make it, the best way I can make it. And then once I have a good story and a good piece of art and I have it ready for print, at that point I'll start promoting it more heavily and hopefully just continue making what I feel is a really important story. So that's the thing, is like I think that Jan, like your question, if you're watching, and if you're not Jan's question, I think that it was a really inspiring question, really interesting to me, because it made me sit back and think about the fact that I have changed my styles and that I did sort of evolve to this point. And I can say that I'm so much more proud of the stuff I'm doing now than anything I've done in the past. There are a lot of things I did in the past that I'm pretty proud of. I did a poster that I think, like, sequentially was a cool idea. It was like people walking through a park, and as they walk through it, it's panels and it's Central Park, and as they walk through it at the end, they've aged. So they've gone from children to adults, and so you're watching time pass and the color all shifted with the time and stuff like that. There are some t-shirts that I'm still super proud of and I still think are really good t-shirt designs, but at the end of the day, this is the style that I'm the most proud of. The downsides of this style is it's a lot more time consuming. I could probably knock out these pages. Let's say I weren't to do any cross hatching at all, I were to just leave them as line art. So if you watch this channel, that would be like the first stage of my inking. You'll notice generally on like the sped up and the real-time process videos, usually I start by doing all the contour lines. And I could do that with solid blacks and have the page done in like a night, like an entire page. But I wouldn't be happy with the look. I wouldn't feel like it was finished. And I want to make stuff that I feel is finished. And to be honest, I don't think that I was that great at that style. I think it worked, but I don't feel like that was my voice. What I'm working in now feels like my voice. So my answer is kind of like a cop-out in a weird way, because why I changed styles from like this really flat, graphic, quicker way to execute stuff really came down to feeling. So feelings, that's why I changed it, because right now the style I've arrived at, I feel better represents my capabilities as an artist, and I also think it better represents the story, and I also just, at the end of the day, it feels more representative of who I am as an artist. Now, does that mean there aren't some days where I look at, like one of my favorite artists is Jason Lutz, and he did this brilliant, he's working on this brilliant series of graphic novels called Berlin, and his style is really tight, but there's like no hatching. It's just very clean. So it's very solid line art and controlled blacks. And when I look at that art, I do have moments sometimes of going, I should have chosen to work that way. Or if I look at Mary Blair, I'm like, why didn't I just do this in simplified shapes and tell the same story in this style, because I really love it. There's a million styles I love, but this style is the one that felt right for me. So I guess that's the answer, is like, I think when you're choosing what you're going to do, you want to think about your objective. If your objective is to work in mainstream superhero comics, then you really should come up with a simplified style. Meaning, not simplified on the anatomy, the detail, the realism, probably even tighter on that kind of thing. Definitely, like, make sure your perspective's dead on, but, you know, you might want to come up with something that's looser in value and shading, because it's not going to translate well with the coloring process. So that was that's a huge thing to include too. Were I doing this book for color, to be colored, I wouldn't be executing it in the style I'm executing it in now, because it wouldn't look good in color. Like, black tends to, if you put black lines over color, it already desaturates the color. And if you do shading and then you have a color fill under it, and that's black, like crosshatched line art over a flat color, it really just sucks all the color out of it. So if you're actually like working in ink and then you're coloring your inks and you're noticing that your colors look really dull, first check your CMYK levels to make sure there's no K in there, right? Because the black just sucks the saturation out of it. Next, make sure that you have some kind of color at 100% on the CMYK levels, because when you have like 90% yellow, the 10% is white, and white does, guess what, desaturates your color. So that's one thing. But another thing to consider is, if you have too much black line art going on above your color is really going to look dull, because the black line art sucks out the vibrance of the color. So anyhow, so that's just a little bit of why I'm working the way I am too, because my overall objective, not like something I chose because of cost or anything like that, my overall plan for this book is for it to be in black and white. And if it's going to be just black and white, I need to either do it really excellently, like do some beautiful brushwork like Jeff Smith did in Bone, the black and white version, where it just really looks good in black and white, or I need to do really rendered, which is, for me, this is pretty rendered, but it's not like super rendered to the point where I'm going to spend like a year on a page. So I hope that answered your question. I'm going to go inside the house now. I've just completed my commute. Thank you for the rad question, Jan. I really want to encourage anybody who watches my videos, feel free to ask me a question. It really, it just makes for a much more fun vlog, because I can actually engage and discuss stuff you guys might be interested in. So that'll do it, and now I'm going to get back to my pencils. I might show you a little bit of progress on my pencils too before I sign off. So alright, I'll see you guys when we're looking at my comic pencils. So I've managed to pencil all of page 52, so this is what it kind of looks like as finished. I had to kind of correct the eyebrows, because when I initially drew them, I drew them kind of too short. So you'll notice the pencil lines are a lot looser, because I can do a lot of that work in ink. And yeah, that's my progress so far. So pretty happy with the page. I think I think it came out pretty good. This is based on a sign in Portland, Oregon that you see when you're driving off of, I think it was Burnside, where you'd see this as you're heading into Portland, the sign for Old Town. So I just, basically that's why I chose to use like even though it's hand lettered, it's brush script with MT, which is a really like generic system font, but that's what they did the sign in. So to emulate that, you have to kind of honor it. And yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty effective page. So we'll see how that works out once it comes to ink. So my son Benjamin is currently counting his cars and arranging them in order and counting them. So here he comes with car number 20. Here he comes. 20 cars! Yay!
20 cars!
And he's been doing this. It's pretty adorable. He's been doing this whole time, just collecting all his Cars toys. Man. He comes.
21 cars.
21 cars! Yay!
21 cars!
Okay, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 cars!
23 cars! 23 cars. Yes, it's 23. So 23 cars.
23 cars, let's count by twos. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 22, 24. Wait, that doesn't seem right. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 cars!
No, 24 cars.
Okay, so overall I feel like I'm having a fairly productive week. Pretty happy with that first panel. So you're probably watching that being inked below as we speak, but I am speaking to you from the future and telling you when it's completed, I feel a very strong sense of contentment. So yeah, so thanks to those of you who've just subscribed and commented and liked and shared. Thanks to Jan for asking such a rad question that got me thinking about just how styles change. I mean, you can see below, like if you go to joshuakemble.com and you just check out some of my shirts like Attack of Literacy or a League of Cliche Supervillains and stuff like that, that's like kind of the old style I used to work in. And it's, you know, just this really heavy blacks and just solid blacks and solid whites, and now I'm like doing this crazy cross-hatching style, and each one has their own strengths and benefits, as I hope I described in this video, but this is kind of where my heart's at right now with black and white work for this particular story. And even within this story it shifts, but I've already gone into that. So anyhow, a long night. I hope you guys are having a productive time making art, and you know, honestly, I'm really thankful for this. One other little update that's much more vloggy, non-art related update. I'm pretty proud because for about 2.5 weeks straight now, I've managed to every night and every morning work out on that the rowing machine, which is kind of awesome. So I'm actually exercising like every morning and every night before bed, every morning before work, and I actually do have a lot more energy. And I think actually from what I've read, like, you know, exercise can help with depression. It can help, like, not help get depression, but help avoid depression. It definitely helps you have better blood flow, which helps your, you know, just ability to stay awake, and it helps your endurance. So it's like I don't feel as beat all the time. I still feel exhausted because like I work a pretty challenging job, but at the same time it's like it has worked. People do not lie. Exercise is good. So I'm trying to apply some of the same self-discipline that I've been applying in making this comic that you're seeing below to exercise. And kind of like with this comic, like something to mention is like what you're watching below is actually about 2 hours worth of work, which just sprung out of sitting down and intending to do 15 minutes of work. And I find more and more that it's a lot easier to get that 2 hours done just by forcing myself to sit down for that 15. Because the second you get that you get in the zone, then like suddenly it's not so much work and you wonder why you put off doing it in the first place. And I feel the same way with exercise, but what's cool is by building those habits, it really benefits us. So hopefully by the next week, when I vlog again, I'll be able to follow up and say that I've stayed consistent with it. And I am a little closer to finish with page 52, so it's slow and steady towards that, you know, end goal. I'm over halfway there now, which is kind of exciting. So yeah, so I will see you guys next week. And if you haven't, I know I said it like a few minutes ago, but if you haven't, hit subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. So that'll do it. And thanks to those of you. And I've already said all my thanks, and I'm just running through it because I'm really sleepy. It's kind of late, and it's Friday. So I will see you guys next week. I hope you had a good art week.